The time came midway upon the journey of our life. I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward path had been lost. Ah, me, how hard it is a thing to say. What was this forest savage, rough and stern, which the very thought renews the fear? So bitter is it, death is little more. Midlife identity lost. The journey that you are on seems to have vanished. The roles that you were playing have changed, shifted. The ground beneath your feet has shifted. The straightforward path seems to have disappeared. That's an excerpt from Dante's Divine Comedy. This is the Austin James Haynes podcast. I'm back here at the Grand Parade, just off the trail. The sun's about to set. I am drinking up these days, these warmer autumn days when the sun is bright and there's a little heat in the air, so we can talk about this midlife identity lost and found. Who are you now? Who are you now? That's the question that I want to pose to you, and I want to share with you another poem. I want to share with you a little bit of perspective. I'm not going to solve all of it on this podcast today, but I will provide some perspective for you. And maybe for someone out there, this could be a radical shift in your perspective that changes your midlife season into a midlife crisis, or a season of anxiety to a tranquil time of refresh, reset, if you will. I know that midlife is riddled with change. We ventured out on our journey. We felt so sure and confident. So we had big dreams and visions, and many of those dreams perhaps have come true. But maybe you're like me, that you felt lost from the beginning. I felt lost from the beginning. I felt like I was always behind. I felt like everyone had it figured out but me, and my ego craved that identity, craved that approval, if you will. It wasn't an internal thing, it was an external thing. To play the role, to be a good boy or girl, to make it to adulthood, to arrive at this place where somehow we feel whole, but that place is elusive. However, we've done some great things to this point. Perhaps you've raised children, you've helped your parents, you landed a great job and you became successful, you overcame the great obstacle, but something's lost. This beginning part of the Divine Comedy has so many different meanings, but today I point it to midlife. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself lost within a forest dark. The straightforward path had been lost. Ah, me, how hard it is a thing to even say. I don't even want to admit it. I can't even look at it. I don't even want to admit it. Everything I thought I was supposed to do, I did. Or at least most of it. What is this savage place? What was this forest savage, rough and stern? Well, it's midlife for some of us. And when I think about it, which in the very thought renews the fear, this is why we can find ourselves anxious, anxiety. The good book says, be anxious for nothing, but it's easier to say and write than it is to put into practice. He goes on to say, so bitter is it, death is little more. And this is why some folks can be riddled with mental health issues. They never got the approval from a parent. They feel lost. And here's what I want to offer to you, that your roles have changed, perhaps. The roles that you played from your 20s and 30s and finding your way through that beginning part of life, maybe you're an empty nester now, and your children are off building their own lives, and you became so entrenched in that role that that role has now disappeared or changed, and you feel lost. Why? Because you've merged yourself with the role. And this is what happens when we start out. We can become so merged with the role that we're playing that when it changes, we can feel like we don't even know who we are. I've had clients and friends on more than one occasion say that to me. I don't know who I am anymore. It's because you lost your role. But what if, I make a bold claim, what if that's the ideal place? Are you crazy? I'm dealing with anxiety and mental health. I might be on antidepressants. How can this be the ideal place? It's a vulnerable state. And maybe we're supposed to feel that vulnerability. Maybe we're supposed to feel lost at times. Or accept that it will happen. Not accept it as a permanent place. Just accept that it happens. Because in that vacuum, in that void, we have a chance to go deeper. Who are you now? Before I answer that question, I want to share this other poem. And I want to give credit to David Whyte, the great poet, who I learned this from. I learned this. Now, his interpretations are a little different, and I'm relating this to midlife because it's so appropriate. But I heard this poem by David Wagoner from David Whyte. It's called Lost. But the first line is stand still. Let me read it to you now. Stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger. Must ask permission to be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, I made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. Take a moment to pause and breathe with me here, the Grand Parade Trail on the edge of the forest. Breathe in through your nose. Let your belly expand. Exhale through your mouth. Be still. Be still. Breathe. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Breathe. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger. Must ask permission to be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers. I made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. This idea of traversing midlife and the road disappears. And the poem is so beautiful in that it recognizes this place. And I'm just loving this backdrop of this tree behind me. I'm going to snap a picture of that here. If you're on the podcast audio, come over to the YouTube video at Austin James Haynes. And if you're on the YouTube, be sure and follow your favorite podcast to not miss an episode. And be sure to subscribe. And if you feel inspired by this, share it with somebody who might be traversing midlife or a midlife reinvention. My intention is that you connect to the deeper part of yourself if you're in the middle of this lost season. And what a lot of people do in their midlife, they double down on the things that they did in the past. They might feel burned out, but they go back to what they know because it's certain. But if you don't, like it says in the poem here, but then it says, I made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying here. How powerful is that? You get anxious and fearful and you go back to the things that you learned in the past and you double down. But like it says, if you leave it, you may come back again, saying here. You're only going to find yourself in the exact same place. And then he goes on to say, no two trees are the same to raven, no two branches are the same to wren. What does that mean? It means be present to what's happening in this moment. Midlife has conditioned your nervous system to what's next. We stop observation. Think of the observation of a child. Think of the creativity of a child. And that's why this poem is so powerful. Pay attention to what the branches are doing as the wind tickles as the wind comes through and tickles the branches and the leaves that remain. Pay attention to the hawk and the raven as it soars across the sky. Listen. The forest breathes, it answers. It's finding this pure state. It's turning this state of lost and confusion that the ego wants its identity. And it's allowing that to dissolve and being in this state where that initial reaction is confusion and feeling lost becomes the pure, raw, vulnerable state where the deeper I am, the deeper part of yourself, awakens new seeds from a greater depth that you've ever known. It may not be attractive to the world, but it's from the depth within you. And that's the place. And you pay attention, you become renewed and refreshed. But it's how we're interpreting midlife. Midlife is the perfect time for a powerful rebirth. Who are you now? Eckhart Tolle says, regardless of what age you are the deeper I am. You see, in midlife, when those roles burn away and that ego identification and expectation disappears, people will feel lost. Some people, sadly, will take their own lives. But what if this season of midlife and feeling like all is lost, that's where life is truly gained, where full life is truly gained. And the real you is the listener, the one who listens, observes, and sees what's happening in the mind. Who is the one observing? Pause and breathe as we look at these final moments of this day here with the sun. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In through the nose, belly expands, out through the mouth. let your deeper I am, your deeper self, start with one deep breath, embracing this season of midlife. And what I have found for me, to get personal, is that everything I thought has kind of disappeared in some sense, or it's changed its meaning, and what's coming through is something deep and powerful. But it only came from embracing feeling lost. I want to thank you for being with me today. And again, I want to encourage you to engage, put a comment in, send me a question, go to austinjhaynes.com. You can book an appointment there. And just to reference these poems today, I'll put a link in the show notes for The Divine Comedy by Dante. And full disclaimer, I am not an expert on Dante's Inferno, but this first part really speaks to me and midlife, and I wanted to share it with you. You don't need to be an expert to draw from those poetic lines. And then the second poem is Lost by David Wagoner. I'll put that in the show notes. I highly encourage you to read it. And I want to give credit to David White, because that's where I learned about these incredible poems. And I couldn't go another podcast without sharing them and let them resonate with you. And if this podcast is not for you to get all the answers, right? But I'm going to say this again. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. You may say, well, Austin, how do I stand still? I feel anxious. That's the invitation. And it goes back to the pause and breath. Because the pause and breath brings you from that anxious state. It starts to usher in that calm. And in that calm, then you can find the calm. And this is a practice. This is why you're tuning into this show, to make this a practice for your midlife. And realize you don't have to have all the answers right now. That's what this is about. This is being open to not knowing. And that's a paradox. It's counterintuitive to what your ego and your thinking mind wants to do. But in order to allow the deeper stuff to germinate, it takes time. Think about seeds. Think about anything that takes time to germinate, marinate, so that it can sprout and take root. And you can do this by pausing and breathing, connecting to that deeper self. The moment you realize you're thinking, you're starting to touch the observer. You're starting to touch the deeper part of yourself. So you don't need to figure it out right now. Read the poems, go back and listen to this podcast again, and allow it to marinate. And not trying to figure it out, not avoiding going back to what your old habits and thoughts want to do. Be in the void, stand still, pay attention to what's around you, and see what rises from the depth of your being. And I assure you, it might feel a little awkward and confusing at first, but it will feel different, and it will ultimately feel really, really good. Thank you for listening today. This is Austin, closing out another episode of the Austin James Haynes podcast here at Valley Forge National Park at the Grand Parade Trail. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you.